One for the Road, Chapter 12. Raphael waited in the van down the street from the apartment complex, slightly confused by Ben's call. In truth, he hadn't really expected to hear from him again. The boy was clearly driven by survival, and Raphael thought he would simply flee if he had encountered the creature again. But he had called, and he had sounded decided. Frightened, yes, but it was as though he had finally accepted what his instinct had surely been trying to tell him. Ben and the dog rounded the corner around 7:30. Raphael exited and began to make his way toward him, fully aware that the boy might be cautious of the windowless van. "Morning, Mr. Raphael. So, what exactly happened?" "Well, there's a lot, and I don't know what all will be useful to you, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning, after we talked." Ben began by elaborating on his feelings about the desk clerk, Burke, how uncomfortable he'd made him feel, the barely concealed disdain he had, the hate for the dog, before talking about his evening covering for the man. He described an odd encounter with a skull-faced man dressed in cowboy clothes, a friend of the owner's, and the two others, who appeared to be either on drugs or in a trance. He told Raphael that he felt like Skullface, as he called him, seemed like the type of guy who would shoot you in the guts if you stepped on his boots, and that despite that, he felt the urge to follow them for a moment. They discussed the boy's knife-wielding vigil. Raphael was again impressed. His dreamless but troubled sleep, and his encounter with the lady in white that morning, who somehow knew his name. That moment seemed to change everything for the boy. When everything clicked and perception overrode his rational mind's denial, he became certain the place was haunted. Raphael supposed that wasn't too far off the truth. Ben told him that was when he was completely consumed by the need to escape. "Shit, I can't believe I almost forgot." "What's that?" "I went up to my room to shower and open the windows because after you asked me about my dream, I thought there might be like a monoxide leak in the hotel or something." "It's not a monoxide leak." He couldn't help but chuckle at that. The boy was clever. "But go on." "Well, there was this chill, a localized cold spot, like really cold, like a walk-in fridge or something. Worse than that, it was inside of me." The telltale sensation. Raphael said nothing, hoping to prompt Ben to continue. "I really don't know how else to describe it, other than it made me feel cold, obviously, and small. And really fucking scared. Like I needed to just run. I felt it in the elevator too, after Skullface and the lady in white. I mean, Jesus, were they all ghosts? The whole place was cold now that I think about it. Even when Burke had a fire going, but nothing like in my room." "And that had been where the stranger, the dream visitor, had stood?" "I know it wasn't a dream." Raphael was a bit shocked by the boldness of the boy's statement, but he appreciated it. It was difficult for most people to accept the truth when it seemed to defy their understanding of reality. "What do you think it was?" "I don't know. A ghost, like I told you. Something weird is all I know." It felt like so much hinged on this moment. Raphael debated the idea of bearing everything to the boy. He decided there was little trouble in it. Either he would think him a crazy old man after all, and put the whole incident behind him, or he would believe. And what then? He wasn't sure, but as always, he would trust his instinct when the time came. "Vampires, everyone you met, besides Burke maybe, and including the visitor. It wasn't a dream." Ben's face looked like he didn't know whether to drop his jaw, awestruck, or break out laughing. There's no way." "I assure you there is. I've seen them with my own eyes, like you." Recognition flashed in the boy's eyes, and he seemed to speak more to himself. "The shark teeth. You saw their true face?" "I don't know. They all were like really pale, and they looked normal, I guess. I caught glimpses, though. Mostly just the fangs, and the one in my room had these terrible red eyes. Sometimes their mask slips. I don't know what causes it, but it's more common in the very long-lived and the freshly turned." "This really can't be possible." The boy looked like he might faint for a moment, but he held fast. It's unbelievable, I know, but it's all true. I think you know that in your heart. Vampires? Like from the movies? Count Dracula, Nosferatu? The Lost Boys? You can't be serious. There's a grain of truth in every story, but it gets lost over time. Through the telling and the retelling. Before the movies, before even Bram Stoker, there were folk tales. Ones that spread across cultures and throughout time. Lord knows how long they've lived among us, fed off us. The one I've tracked here, the one that Burke told you was the owner of the hotel, the one I'm certain was your visitor, is nearly 400 years old. Viktor Carlysle was his birth name, the son of a noble English family, who vanished during an expedition to pilfer the Middle East. He appeared 2 centuries later in America and cut a bloody swath across the country on his way to California. The Creek tribe called it the Pale Spring because of all the stark white blood-drained corpses they found. Started a mining company when he got here. It bore his name, but he was careful enough to always keep himself out of the official documentation. That's where people like Burke come in, like Renfield from Stoker's Dracula, Ben said absent-mindedly. Yes, a familiar it's called. As I was saying, the Carlysle Mining Company struck it big, supposedly bought many claims around them, and sold it all shortly before the mines went bust. They built the Castle Carlysle not long after. He's been operating that terrible place ever since, over a century now, preying on us in plain sight. The boy paused for a moment, absorbing the information, but his brow was still furrowed in disbelief. If, and it's a big if, what you're saying is real, then why didn't he suck my blood when he came into my room, or turn me into a vampire? All he did was say mean shit to me. It occurred to Raphael then that he was trying desperately to convince a child, and he had to stifle a laugh. He was operating on instinct once again, not entirely sure why he was going through this trouble, but feeling it somehow necessary, like an itch that demands scratching. Back to the subject of familiars, I believe that's what he wanted from you. Went to shape early and easily to his will, into his weapon, as he put it to you. At the very least, he sees that potential in you. If he found you lacking, that would be a different story, he thought but didn't say. He thought that much was obvious already, but didn't want to frighten Ben by saying it out loud. I really can't believe it. How the hell do you know all this? What, you're like Van Helsing or something? Not quite. He always found it funny that Van Helsing was assumed in the public consciousness to have been a vampire hunter by trade. In the novel, that wasn't the case. Abraham Van Helsing was a scholar and a doctor. He was a man who kept his mind open to the possibilities of our reality and so solved the problem that confounded others like him. But Dracula was his first encounter with the creatures. But I've hunted them all my life, since I was a little older than you. Although I do have a couple of PhDs as well. Ben looked him deep in the eyes, and for a moment Raphael forgot he was looking to the eyes of a teenager. Had he been lying, Raphael thought he would have been rather uncomfortable under that stare. Okay, I think I believe you. It's absolutely fucking nuts. But I saw and felt things in that hotel that I can't explain. And the more I think about it now, the weirder it is. It's almost like I was numb to it before. The pained look of denial finally left his face. Now came the hard part, the reconciling. Our minds can work wonders when confronted with perspective-shattering events. The presence of these monsters plays another part, probably to lull their prey before feeding. So if the vampires are in the Castle Carlysle, what are you doing here? You're obviously not staying here. I don't think anyone is hosting an Airbnb at the Sunnyside Estates. Now they were dancing up to the glaring line in the conversation. Raphael wasn't sure how much he wanted to divulge to the boy beyond the creature's existence. Telling him about the crack in the ground, the rabid pack, and the elevator shaft they guarded presented a problem on 2 fronts. The boy would almost certainly want to accompany him into the breach. It was difficult to resist concrete proof once you've accepted the idea. He knew that firsthand. But also, and perhaps the bigger concern, was that the boy was apparently marked by Carlysle. Although he would likely not be returning to the hotel, the creature could still find him if he was determined. and they had a way of getting into one's mind. Then he thought of the elevator shaft again, and finally realized why the warm feeling in his gut had been so intent on getting through to the boy. The shaft was useless to him from the underside without an inside man. Ben had already been welcomed in. The thought of using the boy made him a bit uneasy, but it was like fate had aligned everything for him. He couldn't deny that. Raphael knew it was the only way. There's a small pack of the creatures beneath the hotel, guarding an elevator shaft. There's a tunnel opening in the parking lot here. You're hunting them right now? I was getting ready to go in as you called. I need to come with you, please. He didn't plead like a child might. He stated it firmly. Raphael said nothing, still thinking it over. Please. Like I said, I believe you, but I have to see it with my own eyes. Or I'm afraid in 10 years, I'll start to believe this was all some crazy dream, or my overactive imagination as a kid. I need to know, to see it. That was all he needed to hear. He saw Ben's purpose now, clear as day. In a way, Carlysle was right about the boy, but Raphael would be turning his weapon on him. Okay, you'll join me, but you'll stay back and hold the flashlight. The pack should be asleep, but they are wild, blood-crazed creatures. Listen to my every order, and if I fall, run for your life, Ben. Don't hesitate. There's a momentary pang of guilt in him, but his father had taken on his first hunt when he was 18, and his father had been 30 years younger than himself at the time. Raphael had his instinct sharply honed, like a steel blade, and despite his displeasure with the side effects of the age that came along with it, the benefit of decades of experience, he thought that would be more than enough to coach the boy through. Besides, he'd be taking a much more cautious approach this time. He recovered the duffel bag from the van, which housed the pump-action Mossberg 500, the box of shells hand-loaded with tiny silver pellets in them, and the various other tools of the trade. The boy would hold the UV spotlight, one much larger and more powerful than the flashlight that still rested outside the crevice down below, while Raphael incapacitated the creatures with as much silver shot as he could let off. Only then would he be able to do the final work of driving the stake through their dead hearts and putting them at peace once and for all. They had to leave the dog to wait for them in the parking lot. He would have preferred to bring him. Dogs had a special abhorrence for the creatures, but trying to pass him down the ladder would be too difficult, and getting him back up would be nearly impossible, especially if they were forced to flee. Ben wasn't happy to leave the dog behind, but eventually he saw the reason. Raphael assumed he knew the dog was out to protect him now, had clearly tried to warn him about the horrors within the hotel. Understandably, he didn't want to leave his side, but finally he gave the dog a parting scratch behind the ears and they descended. Stay put, boy. We'll be back, Ben called, his voice quivering a bit, doubtfully. The passage wasn't quite as frigid as it had been the day before, leading Raphael to believe the creatures had left the tunnel last night, at least not through this exit. Ben was shivering, but clearly he was either trying to ignore it or hide it from Raphael. His head darted around anxiously. Don't worry, we have a decent way to walk. The chill is their trail and lingers behind them for days, sometimes even weeks. This one is still nothing compared to the one in my room. That was like my soul was in a deep freezer. Yes, I think the ones in this tunnel are newly turned. Their auras are weaker. And they're mindless, he thought. They walked until the acrid smell of rot came over them. It had been slower going than Raphael's first trek because despite his reassurances, Ben was on edge. It was to be expected, but the fact that he was continuing confirmed what he had already believed about the boy. Raphael stopped. Ben followed suit. Jesus Christ, that smell is absolutely foul. It's like opening a dumpster full of rotting meat on a summer day. It just kind of plows into you. Ben said, twisting his face in disgust and pinching his nose, not knowing it would be no help. It means we're getting close now. Raphael kneeled down and began gathering his supplies from the duffel bag. Listen to me now. Ben nodded in agreement. There are 3 of the creatures nesting down here, and as I've told you, they're more feral than usual. That's why I'll be using this. He pulled out the shotgun and racked it with a click. It's loaded with silver shot and shouldn't have any trouble tearing through the lot of them, so silver bullets kill them? Shouldn't we have crucifixes or holy water or something? The boy interjected. Not all the methods from the stories are real. Silver won't kill them, not unless it pierces their hearts, but it does cause them terrible pain, and it slows down their regeneration. Kinda like rock salt, huh? I suppose so. Now, stop interrupting. He did his best to channel his father. Obviously, I'll lead. You'll be behind me carrying this UV light. It will hold them at bay long enough for me to unload on them. As we approach, keep the light off until I say otherwise. If they're asleep, it'll wake them. Ben nodded. Then, I'll drive the stake through the hearts of any of them that live. Fucking metal, Ben laughed nervously. Most importantly, obey any command I give you quickly and precisely. It overrides all of the plan. Sometimes we must adapt. Definitely, I get it. Then let's continue. They pressed on. When they were greeted by the animal graveyard and its squelches and crunches, Ben looked as though he might be sick, but he rallied. Raphael was shocked to see that the UV flashlight that had landed so serendipitously was still casting its purple beam into the crack. Looked like the things hadn't left at all last night. Maybe the light had kept them contained. Here it is. He gestured to the crack. Keep quiet and stay close. As he approached, he heard inhuman scratching and chattering emanating from the storeroom beyond, and took it for a bad sign. Their lack of a meal had seemed to disturb their sleep, and the light that they loathed so much, keeping them hemmed in, likely had them in a rage. Turn the light on, Ben. The more powerful glow of the spotlight lit the path before him in immediate response. So far, so good. They were only a few steps down the green hallway before the spotlight illuminated the storeroom. The 3 creatures who remained were up and pacing around the room like lions in the zoo. They whipped their heads toward the source of the light in unison, and when they found it, let out a guttural scream that resonated off the walls and through Raphael's bones. He was squeezing the trigger then. A white muzzle flash lightened the room for a split second that made the creature's movements look even more erratic and unnatural. One of the thing's right shoulder and part of its jaw was torn away with the first shot. Its arm swung sickeningly from the still-connected skin and tendons as it leapt on top of a crate and began to skitter up the wall, spraying thick, steaming black blood across the walls as it went. Raphael drew in a deep breath to steel himself and choose his next shot. The spotlight seemed to be doing little to keep them at bay. He thought these beasts might even charge into broad daylight, they were so starved. He would have to be precise, or he was dead. Probably the boy, too. One of the creatures dropped to all fours and began zigzagging toward him, successfully avoiding his second shot. It moved like some kind of horrific, diseased ape. He heard Ben say, "Holy shit!" The thing tucked its knees and propelled itself forward in a lunging tackle. He squeezed. The shot struck true. The backside of the creature's skull exploded in a wet cloud of black, white, gray, and silver. The force spun it around madly, and it lay in a growing pool of coagulated blood, limbs twitching spastically like a smashed spider, its teeth gnashing at the air. The one now on the ceiling had gone forgotten. By the time Ben called it out to him, it was too late. He had the shotgun leveled at the 3rd in the group. What used to be a woman, judging by the clothes. But before he could take the shot, the other one dropped on him, knocking him to the ground. "Drop the spotlight and run, Ben. Run for your life, damn it." But the boy was not listening. The woman creature had slowed her rush and was almost shuffling toward them now. Clumps of thin, dead brown hair flowing from her head like a corpse. The thing on top of him was desperately trying to sink its fangs into his throat, but the damage to its jaws and its dangling arm made it easier to fend off. He struggled with the shotgun, trying to find an angle on the thing's heart while not getting bitten. The strength even in its one arm was enough to keep him pinned down. The woman was growing closer, and it seemed to be making some strange sort of noise. Not a scream nor a snarl, some unintelligibly low rasp. Raphael hadn't noticed the sound of Ben's sobs. "Ben, listen to me! You have to run!" He had almost found his angle. The barrel of the shotgun was now successfully holding the creature back. The woman stepped right past, paying him no attention, and as he did, the rasp became clear. "Benny. Benny. Benny." The words seemed to slither from its mouth in a strange, wretched whisper. No, was all Ben could muster. "Benny. Benny. Benny. Mama." Raphael heard him say, not the voice of a scared boy, but a broken man. Raphael took the shot. The thing's chest cavity and noxious heart gave way and painted the ceiling above them. Blood dripped down in gelatinous blobs. Ben dropped the spotlight, but he would not turn to run. "Benny?" The thing that was the boy's mother seemed to ask, drying out each syllable before lunging at him with a hiss. The pair hit the ground. The boy screamed through his sobs. Raphael threw the corpse from on top of him and shot to his feet. The woman was on top of the boy. Neither was moving, but he could hear Ben weeping, a deep, heart-wrenching cry. The handle of the buck knife the boy kept at his hip was wrapped in his hands, the blade buried in his mother's chest up to the hilt. He was covered in the tar-like blood, but he looked unhurt, at least physically. His eyes stared wildly at the ceiling, but it was obvious he saw nothing. Tears were flowing freely down the sides of his face and mixing with the blood on the pavement. He gasped for air like a beached fish, or an infant who hasn't yet learned to breathe between cries. After a few moments he spoke, still weeping, but with steel in his voice. "I'm going to burn that fucking place to the ground.